Hey everyone, it's your host Ruby, and welcome back. And this time, we are actually going to get into Chapter 8 of The Darkest Minds by Alexandra Bracken. If you haven't already listened to the previous videos, please go ahead and check them out. And yeah, please give this video a like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. And if you haven't already, please grab your snacks and your drinks, sit back, relax, and let's get into Chapter 8. She opened her mouth, her lips parting in a silent gasp. At first blink, I hadn't been able to tell, but she was definitely a girl, and a little one at that. 8, maybe 9 at the most, judging by her size. Just a baby, drowning in an oversized Indy 500 shirt, complete with checkers, flags, and a bright green race car. Even weirder, her hands and arms up to her elbow were covered by bright yellow rubber gloves, the kind my mom used to wear when she scrubbed the bathroom or did the dishes. The Asian girl's dark hair was shaved down into a buzz cut, and she was wearing baggy boys' jeans, but her face was so pretty she might have been a doll. Her full, heart-shaped lips formed the perfect O of shock, and her skin paled in such a drastic way that the freckles on her nose and cheeks stood out all the more. "Where did you come from?" I managed to choke out. The stunned look on her face flashed to one of terror. The hand she didn't have jammed down into a container of Twizzlers slammed the door shut with a streak of yellow. "Hey!" I pushed back, open in time to see her dash out of the door at the other end of the stockroom. Heading out into the rain, I was right behind her, throwing my backpack over my shoulders as I ran past the shelves. The door had caught on a large rock and went flying open as I kicked it and sprinted through. "Hey!" Snack-sized bags of pretzels and chips were spilling out of her pockets and beneath her shirt. She had every right to be terrified of the half-crazed girl chasing after her. I could waste time feeling bad about it later, but for now my mind had gotten a whiff of hope, and it wasn't about to let it escape through a parking lot. She had to have come from somewhere, and if she had a way out of this town, or a place to hide until Kate and the others gave up on me, I wanted to know about it. The gas station's back lot was only 4 parking spaces wide, and one of them was taken up by an overturned dumpster. I heard animals tittering inside it as I sprinted after her, keeping my eyes on the back of her gray t-shirt. Her legs were pumping so fast beneath her that she tripped where the lot's loose asphalt met a patch of wild grass. My arms flew out to catch her, but the girl recovered just in time. I was within 2 steps of being able to grab the back of her shirt when she suddenly picked up her speed, zipping through a small cluster of trees that separated the station from what looked like another road. I just want to talk to you," I called. "Please." What I should have said was, "I won't hurt you," or "I'm not a PSF," or something that would have clued her in to the fact that I was just as screwed in the safety department as she was. But my chest was on fire, and my lungs, constricted, stretched tight, and useless by the pain in my ribs. The panic button was jumping up into the air, bouncing against my chest and shoulders. I ripped it off so hard. The chain's clasp snapped. The little girl leaped over a fallen tree trunk, her sneakers squelching through the forest muck. Mine weren't much quieter, but Martin's voice drowned us both out. "Ruby!" My blood ran so cold. It seemed to cease pumping through me altogether. I should never have turned back to look over my shoulder, but I did, more out of instinct than fear. I didn't realize that my feet had stopped moving until Martin's shape appeared on the other side of the trees. He was close enough for me to see the red flush that had overtaken his face, but he hadn't seen me, not yet. "Ruby!" I had expected to find nothing but trees and air waiting for me as I picked up my run. But there she was, a short distance away. The girl had tucked herself behind a tree, not hiding, but also not beckoning me forward. Her mouth was pulled into a tight line, eyes darting back and forth between me and the direction of Martin's voice. When I started toward her, she took off so fast that both feet jumped from the ground, scared off like a little rabbit. "Come on," I gasped, pumping my arms at my side. "I just want to." We broke through the trees, pouring out into a deserted stretch of road. On the other side of the dead-end street was a line of little ramshackle houses, their windows boarded up like black eyes. I thought for sure that she was heading toward the closest one, the house with the gray fence and green door, but she made a hard right and ran for the minivan parked on the side of the road. The car was dented beyond repair, not just on the bumpers, but on the side doors and the roof. And that was to say nothing of the shot out and cracked lights and the black paint that was flaking off in clumps. The nicest thing about it was the cursive, swirling logo that someone had painted along the side sliding door. Betty Jean Cleaning. But it was a car. A way out. I wasn't thinking about the logistics at that point. About whether it had gas or if its engine would even start. I think my heart grew a pair of big, fluffy, white wings at the mere sight of it. and nothing was going to shoot it down. The girl was running so hard she slammed into the side paneling of the minivan and bounced off of it. She landed hard on the ground, but recovered faster than I ever would have. With both yellow gloved hands on the door handle, she ripped the sliding door back with a sound loud enough to shake the birds from the nearby roofs. I got there just in time for her to close the door and slam her hand down on the lock. I could see my reflection in the tinted glass. See how she must have seen me. My eyes were wide and wild, a tangled mass of dark hair, clothes that would have otherwise been too small if camp hadn't made me so damn skinny. I could see bones in my chest I didn't know existed. I ran around to the other side of the car, putting the minivan between me and anyone who would come charging out of the trees. Please. My voice was hoarse. Martin's bellowing voice either echoing around in my mind or it was actually getting closer. The window's tint was light enough that I could look through them and skim the trees for any flash of his waxy skin. If he was getting closer, then Kate and Rob wouldn't be far behind. They must have heard him yelling by now. Two choices, Ruby, I thought. Go back and run? My head and heart were in agreement on run. But the rest of my body, the parts that had been tormented by white noise, poisoned and mistreated by people who claimed they only had the best intentions, stubbornly held its ground. I sagged against the minivan, deflated. It was like someone had crushed my chest in a vise, spinning the handle until every ounce of air and courage had been squeezed out of me. Years at Thurman had taught me to stop believing I could get away from the life people were so eager to set for me. I don't know why I thought it would be any different on the outside. I heard footsteps crashing through the trees and undergrowth louder with each second. When I looked up again, Kate's startlingly blonde hair was weaving in and out of the trees, glowing under the drizzling clouds like a firefly. Ruby! I heard her calling. Ruby, where are you? And then there was Rob, walking right behind her with a gun in his hands. I looked right to the houses on the street's dead end. Farther down the opposite end of the street, I saw signs with symbols I didn't recognize, but that the unknown that had to be better than going back to Kate. The little girl inside of the car looked at me, then turned to look at the trees. Her lips pressed together, pulling down into a frown. One hand was clenched on the door handle, the other on her seat's armrest. She started to stand once, only to sit back down and look one more time in my direction. I swiped at my face. with the back of my hand and took a step back. Hopefully the girl knew well enough to hide herself when Kate and Rob ran after me. I'd led them as far away as I could. I'd lead them as far away as I could. It was the least I could do after scaring a few years off her life. I hadn't even fully turned to go when I heard the door roll open behind me. A pair of hands reached out and seized the back of my uniform, twisting the fabric for a better grip. When she yanked, I fell back, hitting the closest seat. My neck snapped against the armrest, and I rolled onto the rough carpet behind the front passenger seat. The door roared shut behind me. I blinked, trying to clear the dark spots swimming in my vision, but the other girl wasn't about to wait for me to get settled. She climbed over my tangled legs to get to the rear seat, grabbing my shirt collar and giving it a hard tug. Okay, I said, crawling toward her. My fingers slid against the minivan's gray carpets, with the exception of a few stacked newspapers and tied off plastic grocery bags tucked under the rear seats. The inside of the minivan was pretty well kept. She motioned for me to crouch down behind one of the middle seats. As I pressed my knees against my chest, I realized that despite the fact that I had followed her order to the letter, she still hadn't spoken a single word to me. "What's your name?" I asked. She draped herself over the top of the rear rest, her feet kicking at the air as she dug around for something in the back. If she heard me, she pretended not to. "It's all right. You can talk to me." Her face was flushed when she reemerged, a paint-splattered white sheet in hand. She pressed a finger to her lips, and I, wisely, shut my mouth. The girl shook out the folded fabric and threw it over my head. The smell of fake lemon cleaner and bleach assaulted my nostrils as the sheet settled around me. I opened my mouth to protest, reaching up to yank it away from my face, but something stopped me. Someone was coming. No, more than one person. I caught snippets of their back and forth, heard their feet slap against the pavement. The sound of a door opening stopped my heart dead in my chest. I swear to God it was her, Liam. The voice was deep, but it didn't sound like an adult. And look, I told you, she'd beat us back. Suzumi, did you run into trouble? The other car door opened. Someone else? Liam let out a relieved sigh. "Thank God," he said, with a hint of a southern drawl. Come on, get in. I don't know what's going on, but I don't want to stay long enough to find out. The skip tracers were bad enough. Why won't you admit that it was her?" the other voice snapped. 'Cause we ditched her in Ohio, that's why. Above the sound of Liam's voice and the blood pounding between my ears, I heard another voice. Ruby! Ruby! Kate. I pressed both of my hands against my mouth and squeezed my eyes shut. What in the world? The first voice said, Is that what I think it is? The first gunshot popped like a firecracker. It might have been the distant or the army of trees and undergrowth muffling it, but it seemed harmless, a warning. The next one had much sharper teeth. Stop! I heard Kate scream, Don't shoot! Lee! I know. The engine sputtered to life, and the squeal of tires wasn't far behind. Zoo! Seatbelt! I tried to brace myself, but the car tossed me back and forth between the seats. At one point, my head cracked back against between seats. At one point, my head cracked back against the plastic side paneling and drink holder, but no one was paying attention to the strange noises in the back seat when someone was firing a gun. I wondered if Rob had given the other rifle to Martin. Zoo, did something happen in the gas station? The voice identified as a Liam pressed. There was an edge of urgency to his words, but not panic. We had been driving for over 10 minutes and were well away from the guns. His other companion, however, was a completely different story. Oh my God, more skip tracers. What were they having a freaking conversation? You realize what would have happened if we'd been caught, don't you? He railed, and they were shooting at us. Shooting! With a gun! Somewhere to the right of me, the little girl giggled. Well, I'm glad you find it funny, the other one said. Do you know what happens when you get shot, Suzumi? The bullet rips through Chubbs! The other boy's voice was sharp enough to cut off whatever gory tale he was about to share. Settle down, okay? We're fine. That was a little bit closer than I would have liked, but still, we'll have to try to make better mistakes tomorrow, right, Sue? First voice let out a strange groan. I'm sorry about before, Liam said. His voice was gentle, which was enough for me to put together. He was talking to the girl, not the guy, who had moved on to moaning in dismay. Next time, I'll go with you to get the food. You're not hurt, right? The vibrations from the road dulled their voices. A loose penny was clattering around so loudly in the drink holder that I almost reached up for it from under the sheet to grab it. When the first voice spoke up again, I had to strain my ears to hear him. Did it sound like they were looking for someone to you? No, it sounded like they were shooting at us. Feeling left my hands, draining from the tips of my fingers. You're safe, I told myself. They're kids too. Kids who had unwittingly put themselves in the line of fire for me. I should have known this would happen. This, not my fear of setting off alone into the deserted town, should have been my first concern. but I had panicked. And it was like my brain had melted into a swimming pool of terror. A number of things, Liam was saying, but let's try to focus on finding East River. I needed to get out now, right now. This had been a terrible idea, maybe even my worst. If I left now, they still had a chance of escaping Kate and Rob. I would still have a chance of escaping them too. I looped the straps of my backpack over my shoulders again and kicked the sheet off, taking a deep drag of musty, cool air conditioning. I used the rear seat to prop myself up. 2 teenage boys were in the front seat, facing the road. It was raining harder. It was raining harder now. The fat drops were falling too fast for the windshield wipers to keep up with them, making it look as though we were headed straight into the impressionist vision of West Virginia. Silver skies were above, and a black road was below. And somewhere in between, the luminescent glow of the trees with their new spring coats. Liam, our driver, was wearing a beat-up leather jacket, darker across the shoulders, where the rain had soaked through. His hair was light ashy blonde that stood on end when he ran a hand through it. Every now and then he would glance to the dark-skinned teen in the passenger seat, but it wasn't until he cast a quick look into the rearview mirror that I saw his eyes were blue. I can't see out of the back window when you... His words choked off as he did a double take. The minivan lurched to the right as he spun around in his seat and turned the wheel with him. The other kid let out a strangled noise as the car jerked to the right toward the side of the road. The girl glanced back over her shoulder at me, her expression somewhere between surprise and exasperation. Liam slammed on the brakes. Both of the cars' other passengers gasped as their seatbelts locked over their chests, but I had nothing holding me back from flying between the 2 middle seats. After what felt like a short eternity, but was likely only a hot second, the tires let off a long squeal of pain before the minivan quivered to stop at a dead end. Both boys were staring back at me, wearing 2 completely different expressions. Liam's tanned face had gone porcelain pale, his mouth hanging open in an almost comical way. The other boy only glared at me through his thin, silver-framed glasses, his lips pursed in disapproval, the same way my mom's used to when she found out I had stayed up past my bedtime. His ears, which were a touch too big for his head, stuck out from his skull. Everything between them, from the wide expanse of his forehead down past the thin bridge of his nose to his full lips, seemed to darken in anger. For a split second, I was afraid that he was a red, because judging by the look in his eyes, he wanted nothing more than to burn me to a crisp. Boys. Why did it have to be boys? I peeled myself up off the carpet and bolted toward the side door. My fingers squeezed the door, but no matter how hard I pulled, it didn't budge. "Zoo!" Liam cried, looking back and forth between us. She merely folded her hands in her lap, rubber gloves squeaking and blinking at him innocently, like she had no idea how they had come across the stowaway currently sprawled out by her feet. We all agreed, no strays. The other boy shook his head. "That's why we didn't take the kittens." "Oh, for the love of..." Liam slumped down in his seat, pressing his face into his hands. What were we going to do with a box of abandoned kittens? Maybe if that black heart of yours hadn't been willing to leave them to starve, we could have found them new loving homes. Liam gave the other boy a look of pure amazement. You're never gonna get over those cats, are you? They were innocent, defenseless kittens. And you left them outside someone's mailbox. A mailbox. Chubbs. Liam groaned. Come on, Chubbs. That had to have been a joke's. The kid was as skinny as a stick. Everything about him, from his nose to his fingers, was long and narrow. He leveled Liam with a withering state. I don't know what amazed me more, the fact that they were arguing about kittens, or that they'd managed to forget that I was in the car. "Excuse me," I interrupted, slamming my palm against the window. "Can you please unlock the door?" That shut them up, at least. When Liam finally turned back toward me, his expression was entirely different than before. He looked serious, but not altogether unhappy or suspicious, which is a lot more than I could have said for myself if our situations had been reversed. "Are you the one they were looking for?" he asked. Ruby," Chubbs corrected. Liam waved his hands. "Right, Ruby." "Just unlock the door, please." I yanked the handle again. "I made a mistake. This was a mistake. I was selfish. I know that. So you have to let me go before they catch up." "Before who catches up? Skip tracers?" Liam asked. His eyes darted over me from my haggard face, down my forest green uniform, to my mud-stained shoes, to the PSI number that had been written on their canvas toes, and permanent marker. A look of horror flickered over his face. "Did you just come from a camp?" I felt Zoo's dark eyes on me, but I held Liam's gaze and nodded. "The Children's League broke me out." "And you ran away from them?" Liam pressed. He looked back at Zoo for confirmation. She nodded. "What does that have to do with anything?" Chubbs interrupted. "You heard her. Unlock the stupid door. We already have PSFs and skip tracers after us. We don't need to add the League to the list. They probably think we took her, and if they put in a call that there are freaks roaming around in a beat-up black minivan," he couldn't bring himself to finish. "Hey," Liam said, holding up a finger. "Don't talk about Black Betty that way." "Oh, excuse me. for hurting the feelings of a 20-year-old minivan. He's right, I said. I'm sorry, please. I don't want any more trouble for you. You want to go back to them? Liam was facing me again, his mouth set in a grim line. Listen, it's none of my business, Green, but you have the right to know that whatever lies they fed you probably aren't true. They aren't our angel network. They have their own agenda, and if they plucked you out of the camp, it means they have a plan for you. I shook my head. You think I don't know that? Okay, he returned in a calm voice. Then why are you in such a hurry to get back? There was nothing judgmental or accusatory about the question. So why did I feel like an idiot? Something hot and itchy bubbled up in my throat, drifting up until it settled beneath my eyes. Oh God, my kid. Oh God, the kid was looking at me with all the sympathy and pity required of someone watching a stray puppy being put down. I didn't know if the emotions swelling inside me was anger or embarrassment, but I didn't have time to sort it out. No. But I can't. I didn't mean to drag you into... I did mean to, but... I saw Zoo move out of the corner of my eye, reaching for me. I jerked away, sucking in a harsh breath. A hurt expression crossed her face, staying long enough for me to feel guilty about it. She had been trying to help me, to be kind to me. She didn't know what kind of monster she had saved. If she had, she would have never unlocked the door. Do you want to go back to them? Chubbs was looking at Liam. Liam was looking at me. He had caught me again with his eyes, and I hadn't realized it. No, I said, and it was the truth. I don't. He didn't say anything, only shifted the minivan out of the park. The van rolled forward. What are you doing, Ruby? I willed my mind to reach for the door, but it seemed too far. My hand too heavy. If the league comes after us, it'll be okay, Liam said. We're just taking her to the nearest bus station. I blinked. That was more than even I was expecting. You don't have to. Liam waved me off. It's fine. Sorry we can't do more. Can't risk it. Yes, you're right, Chubb said. So explain to me why we aren't taking her to one of the train stations which are closer. When I looked back up, Liam was studying me. His light eyebrows pulled together by some unspoken thought. I tried not to squirm under his gaze. Remind me again, Ruby, right? I'm sure you've caught on by now, but I'm Liam. The lovely lady behind me is Suzumi. She smiled shyly. I turned and raised a brow in the direction of the other boy. I'm guessing your name isn't actually Chubbs? No, he sniffed. Liam gave me the name at the camp. He was a bit of a porker. Liam had a small smile on his face. Turns out field labor and a restricted diet are better than fat camp. Zoo can back me up on this one. But Zoo wasn't paying attention, not to any of us. She had pulled her hoodie up over her ears and twisted around in her seat so that she was staring over the top of it. Out of the back of the window, her lips were parted, but she couldn't bring the words to them. The color drained from her round face. Zoo? Liam said. What's wrong? She didn't need to point. Even if we hadn't seen the tan SUV speeding right for us, it would have been impossible to miss. The bullet that blew through the back window and shattered it. And that is the end of chapter 8. Tune in next time. And please give this video a like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. Until next time, Ruby out.